Hello, I'm Brad.
And I'm Jason.
You are listening to
Dice in Mind.
This is the episode that you've been waiting for. So if any of you are familiar and our watchers of the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's well known that Mark Ruffalo and Tom Holland are the worst at keeping
Should I have not said that?
Yeah, of plot lines and giveaways. And so I'm their version. I'm that version in this.
That is
podcast.
So true. Well, or in life.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, anything.
Right.
There's no, the vault is a little bit open. So we've talked about, jokes aside, it's all been given away that we're going to look at using the Genesys, the Fantasy Flight games, right? Is it FFG still, or do they own it?
Yeah, it's entirely theirs, but just the Genesys dice mechanic.
Yeah. So they took the Star Wars dice system and mechanic system in effect their system.
Yep.
And they generalized it. Now they did give you material like for Terranoth and for Android and for a couple of others.
Yep.
But it's an open system.
Yeah.
So we, for a long time, originally, Jason, you mentioned this when we talked Fate, talked about maybe adapting Star Trek into a different system. No offense to Modiphius. This predates Modiphius.
It does.
This predates. So this is not an indictment of them. This is just a project that we have talked about doing for eons. We even talked, I think, a long time ago of pulling out some of the old GURPS stuff and trying to do it that way.
And I remember as a kid, as a teenager, playing with some of these ideas with the D6 from West End.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we've talked about it. So I just want to preface by saying this is not an indictment of Modiphius' system, of whom they have received a large amount of capital from me.
So much money.
Yeah.
And to note, we are eagerly, actively awaiting the Game Master Guide for Star Trek Adventures.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes. So, but this is more of us actually taking something we've wanted to do.
Yeah.
We found a really good system that's different from all the others, and applying a universe, a setting, thank you, into a unique dice system from really anything else out there.
Yeah.
Any derivative of D20, D6, or whatever, the 2D20, whatever. So this is more of an experiment and a way for us to potentially play alongside the narrative system we're using for Star Wars. So today, we've kind of alluded to this. Today is, think of this as episode sub 1A of us starting to, in effect, brainstorm this idea of merging Genesys and Star Trek. You're going to hear this. This is going to be organic. It's going to be very much like if Jason and I were sitting on Zoom talking about this anyway.
Which we're doing right now.
Yes, which we're doing right now. The only difference is that we're recording. So
no fourth wall today.
Yeah. So I think that there will some of you that will find this interesting, whether you're hearing it and you're keeping up to date or whether you're hearing it later. It will be interesting to hear for those of you that are listening to this, what if you're listening and you're screaming into YouTube or into the podcast saying, what are you doing? This is not the way you should do it. We want to hear the commentary on it, because this is an open idea that we are playing with. We aren't super expert RPGers, and now all of a sudden we're looking to build a game.
Yeah, that's right.
So that being said, the mechanic itself will probably come up organically in the conversation. But I think we're going to start first with talking about the setting.
Yeah, we're going to talk about setting.
Yeah. And so I know you've got some notes on it. So I've done a lot of talking. I'm going to pause here because you can launch us.
Well, so let's add this, Brad. Major spoiler warning. Brad and I are going to talk unabashedly about Star Trek canon all the way through our current recording date, lost in the mists of 2021. And what that means is if you have essentially not seen all of season 1 of Picard, all of let me think. I don't think
all of Lower Decks.
Yeah, I think really those are the two. I'm not sure Discovery's good. Well,
No,
yeah,
the current was it
season 3
3
of Discovery. So if you're not totally caught up as of September of 2021, right? Because that's when we had Star Trek Day. So if you're not totally caught up, honestly, you should just skip this episode, come back after you make right with the world and have caught up with all of that canon. Because we're not intending to drop spoilers, but I mean, come on, these seasons have been out for a while, and we are going to openly talk about the galaxy and Star Trek as it is in canon up to this point. So just you've been warned.
And as we talk about this, Prodigy's not out, so there's really nothing related to Prodigy. If there are any spoilers,
just watch the trailer again today.
It's not out yet, so there's nothing related. If you watch this after Prodigy or you listen after Prodigy's released, none of that is incorporated in here. Any themes? So
then to be very specific, for those of you who are hardcore geeking out about Star Trek or are just really serious about canon, like Brad, you brought up MCU, and man, are people, I don't know, I guess I'd use canon in air quotes with MCU because that seems to shift every movie, but still some people are really serious about that, and I get that and I respect that. Where are we as of this recording? There might be spoilers for everything through, so obviously all the legacy shows, no question. Picard season 1, Discovery season 3, Lower Decks season 2 episode 6, just to give you all a good sense. We don't know any more than you do regarding Prodigy or Strange New Worlds, although we wish we did, though those will probably come up. So Brad, anything else before we just jump into it?
No, I have some things that we'll talk about in DM corner. But no, we're good.
Okay, so I'm just gonna spout, Brad, and then you just interrupt, and we'll go back and forth. And again, listeners, no fourth wall today. We're just doing this live, as it were, with all of you, and hopefully as Brad and I riff off of each other, we'll come away with some better ideas, because you and I have been talking about this, but just in bits and pieces. Okay.
And again, you're going to hear us talk. This is literally and disagree. This is literally how we chat. The only difference between what you're hearing now and what we would do off camera is you'd hear a lot more ad hominem attacks in the non-recorded version. So we're avoiding that here actively, almost under duress, because we want to keep this clean. Yes. So yes, thank you. With that, I'll just stop there because I still want to quote SNL. Okay, so Brad, we've talked about this again on and off for, well, like you said, quite some time. The way I envision this, let's start with the time first, because we have to situate it, kind of like our Star Wars game, though we'll get to that with the GM corner. It starts in a fairly specific time. My thinking, this is prime timeline. We're not going Kelvin timeline, right? I just want to make sure. No. Okay. They're lovely movies, but they're irrelevant. Sorry. Yes. Okay. But that is a really good question, because I just read an interview with the Hagman brothers on truckmovie.com, and they asked point blank, this is prime timeline for Prodigy, right? For those who don't know, the Hagman brothers are the showrunners for Star Trek Prodigy, and they're like, yeah, this is prime. This is not Kelvin. So yeah, good. This is definitely not Kelvin. This is prime timeline. I imagine it being, let's say, shortly after 2400. So season 1 Picard starts 2399. We don't really know how long it goes. It seems to be weeks, maybe a month or two. Doesn't really matter, but I'm thinking we're talking like 2401, 2402. I kind of like the 2401 ring and feel. That said, Star Trek Picard season 2 is going to come out. I'm banking on
approximately February 22.
Yeah, and let's be honest, we've seen the Picard trailer.
Yeah.
It looks like there is some timeline related plot line to it.
Yep.
So even if we did like 2401, 2402, I don't think it's going to mess with.
I agree with you.
And Picard has anything that happened, for example, in Picard season 1 wouldn't necessarily affect what we're doing, 1. And 2, between Picard, let's be honest, between Picard and Discovery making the jump 900 and some years into the future, that leaves us a ton of things to play. I mean, the only thing we have to think about is the burn, but we're playing
we're not
well
going to worry
before
about that.
that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just arbitrarily say 2401 if we're good with that. And so something you just said in terms of stuff in Picard not applying, I suspect that's largely true for season 2, but of course season 1 sets us up. So let's just not retcon this, but let's kind of reverse engineer this. I think the galaxy at the end of season 1 of Picard sets the patina for our game. So I've taken some serious artistic license here. So we'll just shoot this back and forth. But based on what we saw, so knowing everything that came before, knowing that both Lower Decks is and Prodigy will fill in the blanks of the second half of the 2380s, right? Like who knew the Packlids would become an issue? That is so funny and clever. But knowing that there will be pieces filled in, and that we will continue to develop this slowly, like as we record, there are only 4 episodes left of season 2 of Lower Decks, so we're going to have that much more canon to play with, and Prodigy will be out October 28, which won't be that many weeks after this drops, so you can all be sure we'll be talking about that when it does. So we're gonna have a lot more canon to play with. But okay, so at the time, by 2401 or so, what do we have? Well, I envision our Star Trek setting as still focusing on the Federation, the United Federation planets, but especially around the borders, because so much seems to be happening around the borders, known and unknown. And so, like in my notes, I've got dotted here borders, frontiers, and unexplored regions, because we have some. If we look around Federation space, not to mention the rest of the quadrants, right?
Yep.
We have a number of question marks. So here's let me just go through these quickly. Here are the notes. You can pick these apart as we go. At the end of Picard season 1, we have the intimation that synths, that synthetic sentient organisms, are being accepted, or more likely are now legal. But we know there's going to be, kind of like an FFG Android vibe. I think I think there's a lot we can do with this whole notion of synths, and Picard being either a well-known or maybe rather unknown spokesperson for them. Okay. Yep. So the synths, I haven't thought this through. I don't know how that's going to play out in our games. Maybe or maybe not. I imagine by 01, it's going to be largely, I think it'll be localized, not Federation wide, that synths are present.
I think they're out in the open. I don't think it's, obviously, as we know it, Utopia Planatia is still on fire, right? It's not.
Right. As far as we know. Right. That's
yeah.
Right. So there aren't any more Martian synths. There are just Soji and Picard who are sentient, unless there are other low-level synths in other areas, which presumably there are.
Yeah, so we aren't going to necessarily have a synth commander on a ship.
But we're going to encounter them maybe?
Yeah, that's my thought is we can't. All of season 1 was really driving this idea, and finally, the death of Data, the true death of Data.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think that they are a piece of the plot line. They aren't the plot line.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good. I like that. That's a good way to put it. The destruction of Romulus. Okay. We know that's huge. We know that there is a Romulan star empire, but as far as we know, it's highly contracted. And meanwhile, there is just this huge Wild West, if you will, where the Fenris Rangers are trying to keep some peace in the Romulan Star Empire that no longer is. And so to me, and I don't have anything again articulate, but just notes here, I think that northeastern, really eastern border with the Federation in the Beta Quadrant of the old, let's just call it Fenris Ranger space for the moment. That suggests to me that the Federation will start to move in there, if no other reason than just explorers and whatnot will. But more importantly, and they didn't talk about this at all, no way would the Klingon Empire remain static in that kind of a power vacuum. So to me, I think, one of the major opportunities in our game is what's happening amidst the old Romulan territory, where you have Romulan Star Empire, which we know they still have a formidable force. You have the Fenris Rangers, who are essentially outlaw peacekeepers. You have the Klingons, and then probably the Federation trying to keep some type of peace, trying to broker.
Yeah, I think we can play that. We can play that area without affecting canon.
Right, exactly.
You can play skirmishes, whatever the case may be. I don't think that we should. I know I'm switching gears, but I'm just saying in terms of this idea, like we talked about synths. Remember now, we have Alpha Quadrant bred Jem'Hadar. There is still Dominion, unless the Dominion completely retreated out, which I doubt. They signed the peace treaty on DS9. Right.
The Dominion at the end of DS9 completely returned to the Gamma Quadrant, but doesn't mean, right, like they didn't address it all. The Jem'Hadar, an entire species, didn't address that. There could be remnants, or maybe they choose to come. Also, at the end of that, if you look at kind of the hints of canon and like some of the stuff that popped up on a screenshot map from Discovery Season 3, there is a spread. There's almost this pod of Federation star systems not all that far from the Dominion homeworld, right? So there's a presence there now. So all kinds of interesting things on the other side of the Bajoran wormhole could be. Yeah,
the founders all retreated because obviously Odo healed them. But and the Vorta obviously are, you had that rare case with Wayun, and you had that rare case with a couple, Omediclon and others. Who were independent. But I don't think we can play that, but I don't think it's necessarily, what year was that? Was that 2375? I can't remember when.
Hold on, I have very good. 2375 was the end of DS9.
Okay. So that was a guess more than anything. But we have this idea of the Wild West space where it opened up because of the destruction of Romulus.
Right.
You have the Klingons inevitably going to move in. You have other groups that are probably going to want to move in. You have the Ferengi that are probably trying to corner.
So I've got thoughts about the Ferengi.
Okay.
I think the Ferengi at this point would be in a fairly strong alliance with the Federation, a formal alliance. Things like you had Nog on DS9. Lower Decks has also hinted, right? And we know, granted, it's 900 years in the future, but we know by the time of the burn that there were Ferengi all over the Federation as citizens. Yep. So I think again, you think of the Grand Magus and Mugi, and then Mugi becoming Grand Magus, right? Well,
it was actually Rom that became.
Oh, sorry, Rom. Thank you. Very good. See, you're the DS9 expert here. But I think all of that was potentially bringing those two societies, those two civilizations, closer together, so that there would still be huge division, hilarious comedy potentially in the game between those, but some kind of formal alliance, at least for trade.
I could see that as a grand level. I think you're going to still have your rogue, profit-driven Ferengi.
Absolutely.
We have to dance carefully around Cardassia, just
Mhm.
because we know that Cardassia was decimated when the Dominion turned on them. They were in trouble beforehand, but when the Dominion turned on Cardassia when they
Yes.
were rebelling,
Yep.
so
Billions dead in minutes.
yeah,
Mhm.
and so I think we can have elements there without affecting the plot line.
Now, and here's where we're going to have to be careful. So I'm very excited about this part because you mentioned Cardassia.
Yeah.
So back like when we first started playing with this idea a couple of years ago, when we didn't actually think it would come to anything, one of the first things that struck me was when you look at the end of DS9 and just that whole period in history, I really hope they're going to do something with this in Picard. I don't know. They can't do everything, but I think Cardassia would be the whole Cardassian Empire. And I'm not sure what to call it. I'm just going to say Cardassia, kind of like, whatever to represent the whole
Cardassian Union.
Oh, thank you. Okay. I think the Cardassian Union, whatever it became, by 2401 might be experiencing a renaissance in part or large part because the Federation almost certainly would have gone in with the equivalent of a Marshall Plan.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think you and I talked about this once long ago. Mm-hmm. And so if that's the case, like you think of the end of it, how they talked about, the art and culture that was second to no one in the quadrant. So I think that could be very, very interesting, especially because, again, by the time of the burn, and yet 900 years, I mean, that's kind of like saying, well, look, we just built Notre Dame. And then look, there are Europeans all over the Western Hemisphere. So I get that's not really commensurate, but still, we know that there are Cardassians everywhere around the galaxy. Maybe that starts through this Federation Marshall Plan where they really, really become maybe allies are not the wrong word, but you know what I mean?
Think, yeah, and it's more of an uneasy piece because obviously Cardassia was at war with the Federation, the
Mm-hmm. Well, like
Federation,
modern Germany.
Klingon, Romulan, well, I can't remember what the alliance against.
Yeah, well, we're going there next because there are a couple others to mention.
Yeah, and then Cardassia obviously was obliterated. You have characters like Garrick, and there were others like him that believed that the old Cardassia was dead.
Yep.
You probably still have remnants of the Obsidian Order and the military that weren't probably ready for a Marshall Plan.
So like think of the early 90s Germany after reunification, right? I mean, the Cardassian Union was clearly fashioned after the Nazis, clearly, especially with the Bajorans, and think of like the Obsidian Order. So how when did the Stasi really disappear, right? But meanwhile, in the past 60 years, Germany has gone from being one of the most fascist countries in modern history to one of the most liberal, with a flowering of art and culture and is ecumenity a word, right? And now in 2021, now with Merkel on the outs after 16 years in power, I mean, things are changing, maybe swinging toward the center again. But the Cardassian Union in 2401 is presumably kind of like Germany was heading into the 2000s, right? There's a flowering, and it's totally different.
It's been 25 years. Let's just remember between the last known, now obviously not counting Lower Decks, the legacy shows ended 25 years or 20 years, I guess, with Nemesis, right? Before we have here. So we are taking a little bit of creative license, but we're not going to do anything that'll affect canon.
Right.
So we just have to, so if we are interacting with these species, we have to do it in a way that wouldn't, in effect, make our game non-canon.
Right.
Because I imagine at some point,
that's right,
they started doing it with Lower Decks. They're going to fill in the gap.
They're nuts. They are nuts not to address some of this with Picard season 3.
Yes.
Okay, 3 more quick points that I think have to be brought out in the open. You were heading toward one of them. What the heck is going on with the Tholians?
Oh,
I have no idea, but they have been a persistent threat from TOS onwards, from probably, I believe before that even. And they were part of the alliance of the Axis with the Romulans and the Dominion. Remember that the Tholians were seen as a key partner in that axis.
are you
And
talking about the Tholians or the Breen?
oh, I'm conflating those. I'm
Yeah,
sorry. I'm
switch it out. Switch out the
actually,
Tholians and the Breen.
we need both. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. We need both. The Tholians remain a question mark.
Mhm.
You're right. What's going on with the Breen? Thank you. Rookie mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't have any answers, but I think we're gonna have to play with that idea. Last two things. The Borg is a huge question mark.
Oh yeah.
Especially given the trailer for season 2. Alternate timeline maybe, but it's Q-induced, so we'll see. But the Borg is a huge question mark, and I think kind of corollary to the synth issue. I think we absolutely will and will have to play with Borg and the history of the Borg and the Federation and the other Alpha Quadrant powers, and just what's happening with that.
I think the Borg were, obviously a major part of Picard beyond the synths. I think there's a connection there that hasn't been explored yet on purpose. This idea, remember now, because Soji's, air quote twin was assigned, no, Soji was the twin. Was the one that was the scientist working on the Borg vessel.
Right.
They were still working on that Borg vessel very carefully. We don't know what's really happening with the full-on Borg Empire or the
we
Borg
have no
species.
Idea. Right.
So we can play Borg without affecting canon. The Breen are going to be a much touchier subject because the Breen didn't come in until I think it's the end of season 6, the beginning of season 7.
Yeah.
And the Breen are always, let's be honest. The funny joke was when Kira came in a Breen outfit, and I can't remember, she dressed as a Breen and rescued, I can't remember who it was.
Right, that's
she took the helmet off and said, I don't know how they can breathe in here. And they had this conversation about what they actually looked like.
Right.
Do those seats, do they keep them extremely cold?
Right.
You hear them say, well, the Breen world is extremely cold. Could they be humanoid? Could they look like us and just,
right.
We don't know.
No, and maybe to play it safe, we'll have to just keep them isolationist again.
Yeah.
I lied. 2 more points that are general points because I don't know what to do with them, but I think you and I have to figure it out along the way. First point, is specific. Second point is kind of general. First point, at the end of season 1 of Picard, Soji calls an I'm going with this, an extragalactic synthetic society to wipe out organic life in our galaxy. And then she changes her mind. Good. I'm all for that. And they just go back.
I didn't like that.
No.
In the aspect that it was like I don't know. I can't remember the correct term, but it was literally they just pulled that plot line. To me, it felt like they pulled it out of their hat. So we have this synth empire, the synth species, this synth civilization that all of us they knew about by the end of that, and we didn't know anything about it.
And it sounds like, and it sounds like in season 2 of Picard, they're not going to address it at all because Akiva Goldsman has said, Akiva Goldsmith has said, they're separate stories. They're separate. Well, yeah, stories within the same arc. I don't know what to do with that. My last point is just as a reminder for us going forward, because this to me is crucial. And it's something that I always goofed up and I still don't think about correctly. Even in 2401, the Federation, in fact, all of the known civilizations represent just a fraction of the galaxy.
Yeah.
Right, just a fraction. And yet, Federation has access to the far side of the Gamma Quadrant, and we know that there might be a blossoming there. certainly for trade, right? Again, going to our factors, there's all kinds of potential. And we know that we can assume, well, we know that by Picard, the Federation has become kind of isolationist, so it probably hasn't been expanding much, but had to have been going on a bit. We also know that we know a ton more about the Delta Quadrant. We know that Prodigy is, you write the NX, whatever, the USS Protostar is going to be coming through the Delta Quadrant, but along some different vector or vectors. But we know that there's the Kazon. We know that, and it almost is a sure thing based on a clip that we're going to see them, which is kind of unfortunate, but we'll see. Maybe they won't goof it up. We know that the Borg are there, and that there are transwarp conduits all over, right? So I think we have to be careful. Like, one of the things that I find limiting with the SGA game from Modiphius is it's very bucolic in its sphere of play in the galaxy. And I think we have the potential to go a little broader if we want, and at least address, well, what are the possibilities given all the known or hinted at spaces in the galaxy?
Since we're going to be getting more Delta Quadrant with Prodigy.
Yeah.
What if we, and now that it's been 25 years since the Dominion War, there's been obviously some exploration further in the Gamma Quadrant, you would assume, right?
Tons.
Why not? We don't know if DS9 still exists or not. We don't know what's there in terms of control of the wormhole. We don't know if Bajor has become more xenophobic.
I actually think Bajoran culture has probably begun to spread across the Federation as a peaceful antidote to the anxieties of the time. But yeah.
And I think you'll see a lot more Bajorans. I still thought it was cool as heck when they commissioned Kira as a commander in the Federation and she wore the Federation uniform when she went to help the Cardassians fight, in effect, guerrilla warfare against the Dominion. Right. So you'll see, just like Ro and just like Kira for a period, I think you're going to see an integration. It's been 20, almost 30 years since the Maquis.
Bajor has to be a member system. It has to be.
Oh yeah, it has to be. But we don't even have to play it that way. No. We don't even have to address that. Nope. We can address a friendly environment, which I don't think I'm just wondering if we do something like we're doing with, like they're doing with Strange New Worlds. No. What if we do something in the Gamma Quadrant?
I've thought of that. I think even if we go back to the star maps that came out, or the canon ones that came out around 02, there are already Federation outposts all around the other side, the far side of the Bajoran wormhole. So I think that's an opportunity for like major play, if you wanted, where we could basically just make up species worlds. I mean, again, that's me being overly limited, because you can totally do that. And we talked about this in one of our very first episode, of just how many stars and planets and species there probably are across the galaxy, that you could never exhaust that. Out in the Gamma Quadrant, I mean, we could do whatever we wanted.
We can play, obviously, like you said, transwarp conduits and so on. We saw it in the Delta Quadrant. I think we can, if we do something in the Gamma, we can easily jump back into the Alpha Quadrant,
right,
and play. But I'm just almost wondering if, and again, I'm thinking out loud, just initially, we do something in the Gamma Quadrant, because we can play there without affecting a ton of canon.
Yep.
We can play there, and it can be non-canon and still be enjoyable as canon continues to flow.
Yep.
With us, and as we continue to find out additional information, like with second season of Picard, and Lower Decks is filling in some of that gap between Nemesis and Picard. Do we do something like that, or do we do something? I think we have to go on the edge of
whatever.
Yeah,
that's why I like
we have to be on the
borderlands. Right.
Yeah.
Like I agree. I think that the Gamma Quadrant gives us some major reign. I think that the whole territory of the Fenris Rangers gives us that whole
Yeah.
border in the Beta Quadrant gives us a ton of stuff. And if we're careful with it, we're not going to affect anything with canon. I think the southern, the rimward border of the Federation remains really wide open and unexplored. The last thing, I don't know what you think about this. So I don't know how well you have internalized the map. So at least at the end of TNG, we don't know now. The Federation had kind of wrapped above the Romulan Star Empire and kind of reached down toward the back of the Klingon Empire, if you will. Well, in Star Trek Adventures, there's a huge area back there that they call the Shackleton Expanse. What do you think? My bias is that's another property. My feeling is that's another IP. My feeling is we ignore that or don't call it as such, but that we're aware that whole part of the Beta Quadrant remains entirely unexplored. And that's where we could have some really fascinating Klingon oriented or Klingon in conflict with others oriented storylines.
Yeah. I think so. It's funny, we've been talking about these border areas. It almost feels like we haven't asked this question, but I think we've answered it before we've really asked it. Are we playing a ship of exploration or a military ship? It's purely, and I think
Good.
I think we have to play. I think this era just bleeds exploration.
Well, you're preaching to the choir.
Yeah. So I know I am.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure. I think we obviously are going to be on the same page with this.
Yeah. But for the record, I would like to disagree, but keep going.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, I agree with the thesis, but I think we might be envisioning it differently. So you keep going, and then I'll tell you why you're
wrong. No. Go.
No. Keep going, because it's possible we already are on the same page.
Obviously we're in, I think you said kind of a Wild Westy type of period. Obviously the Federation has, except there's no, what are those tumbleweeds? There's no tumbleweeds, but, and no Clint Eastwood. I think.
No, we only want people who can act in our universe.
Yeah. We are we are exploring, but remember at the end of Picard season 1, the Federation fleet showed up and stared down the Romulan fleet. And folks, if you haven't watched Picard yet and you're interested, you have to watch those few minutes when the Federation fleet interacts with the Romulan
great
fleet.
Scene.
Yes. So we know, and we saw the ships.
And it's a huge fleet. And it's a little concerning, like to me, because I'm sure Shaban was very instrumental in that season. So because of that and his forethought, I suspect that was intentional to help show just how militaristic the Federation had swung subsequent to Mars.
Yeah.
But it is a huge fleet. But again, then it shows us that the Romulans, under the control of the Tal Shiar, perhaps, have become even more militaristic, right? They have all of these lost people and lost worlds, and yet they have a massive fleet of destruction with what was it? What was the how did she phrase that? Like planet eradication pattern 7. It was something like that, where it's like they have multiple ways to remove all life from a planet. Okay, so let's go back to exploration from what you brought up. I'm 100% on board. However, or maybe this is your thinking too, I don't think we want to limit it to Starfleet officers. I think it could be that we need to have the game must be playable if you want to be a Starfleet officer, if you want to be a Federation citizen, and different like careers and whatnot for that, right? Like what about being, I don't know, I'll just stop there because
I think if you think about it, go back to TNG.
Yep.
The Enterprise was not a militaristic ship. We saw a militaristic Enterprise with the Enterprise B episode when it came through.
Right. But
the
that was,
wormhole.
they were at war.
Yeah, they were at
Mhm.
war with the Klingons and losing. So when they went back, it really gave you that dichotomy between an Enterprise at war ship and an Enterprise exploration ship. But the Enterprise was very capable of holding its own. Except when it, you know, obviously it was in effect sabotaged by Ursa Vator, was it, when they destroyed it in Generations? They did something to Geordi's head so they could actually see the shield modulation.
Yeah.
So I think we can have that type of
together or
ship.
one at a time. Sorry, one of the best Riker lines. Keep going.
Well, so much for keeping it clean and nice. But...
No, we could have been talking about molds.
Okay, that's fine. So we can have a ship like that can be ready to stand in line with the Federation fleet.
There's a whole fleet of the Inquiry class, right? Which is, I love that. But that goes to your point, my friend, right? Even though the Zheng He was an Inquiry class, listen to the name, right? The most powerful ships that Starfleet's ever produced, the Federation has ever produced, hundreds of them, they're the Inquiry class. They are presumably ships of exploration.
Yeah. I think so. Maybe am I reading right that one, the ships are more than capable of holding their own. Two, the point of all this is exploration. Three, to your point, and going back to what I was saying, the TNG Enterprise was full of civilians doing exploration and science and all that. And I don't think we should change any of that.
Nope.
With 24/1, I think now more than ever, there's exploration possibilities.
I just don't want to limit it to only Starfleet.
We don't know all. I mean, they did flashbacks to Starfleet when Picard was fighting for aiding the Romulans, right? So we saw a little bit of a different Starfleet, especially the first couple episodes when Picard wanted to borrow a ship and we heard real profanity.
Right.
You know,
but my point is, this is the point I'm going to keep pushing as we're developing this game, though, that I, like you and I have talked how with Star Trek Adventures, one of the things that limits us is you have to play bridge crew. I don't want to. Right. If anything, like think of the episode Nepenthe from when Picard goes to Riker and Troy for help, right? All of that is done, right? Like finding Rios, right? All of that's done by finding these other characters on these other ships. So of course it has to be ship-based, right? We just like you think of Star Wars RPG all the way back to West End, right? Who are the most, like, look at your character, right? The PC you're going to play. Who are the most, we want edginess and we want that freedom. Sometimes you might want to play Starfleet. Other times it might be hilarious to play a character who's not part of Starfleet, who's kind of fringy and pushes against, because the shows over time, a little bit TNG, big time DS9, and then Voyager, really gave us a sense of pushing back against how you can have other perspectives.
Well, I think that'll differentiate it.
Yeah.
I don't want to necessarily have us stuck playing bridge officers or even lower decks, ensigns and things like that. Someone could play a former Federation officer that became a scientist that is on a ship. You could be like a Tom Paris who got kicked out, went Maquis, came back.
Look, Discovery season 3, you could be a courier who goes back and forth between a couple of these societies.
Yeah.
That would be awesome gameplay.
Yeah. So I don't think we need to limit. We can, if we're going to play like a Picard type of thing where we're not playing a Federation ship, that's fine. We know exactly how we're going to interact with the Federation. I don't think we need to answer that question tonight. I think the idea is, I think we have to noodle on this more. Do we play a Picard type of plot where it's not Federation, or do we play a Federation ship that doesn't have full full Federation staff. Think of even Discovery season 2. Burnham's mother wasn't in effect flying around in that suit as a Federation officer anymore. Right. She was a scientist.
Right. Yep.
So
I think that's our challenge, Brad. I think our challenge is for us to design a game that really elegantly allows for both of those things.
Yeah.
All right. That is a perfect time, I think. And we'll have to see. We'll have to see if we have to do another episode of this. But I think at this point, what do you say we walk over to the GM corner?
Yeah, let's do that. And I can tell you right now, you're going to hear a noise because you'll get a kick out of this. This is on my desk.
What are you showing me?
Did I just, hopefully I moved something in it?
Well, you turned your camera off, so it's less surprising to me, whatever you're trying to show me.
Everything will come. There it is.
Oh, no.
No, but my camera's not on. Start video. There we go. I'm holding up Edge of the Empire.
Yep.
The Star Wars book, because I've been reading up on
awesome
the ship that I'm going to have. There's a whole plot. We'll have to talk about that in a future episode.
Yeah, you got something really cool going on, I know.
Yeah. And then this is very different. This is way outside the realm of RPGs, but I picked up, you've known this for a while, that I grew up with this idea that I was going to be a professional musician. That didn't happen. I went down a different path. I really stopped involvement in music for a long time, but I started playing guitar a couple of years ago.
Yep. Just
more by luck, because my son was going to play and then quit. We had the equipment, so I started playing and got really into it. I picked up this book. It was how you can buy them used on Amazon. So I don't know if there's a newer version, but I've been doing a lot of work on guitar this week because I started my lessons again, in-person lessons.
Yep.
So beyond even RPGs, I know you study piano.
Yep. Trying.
Yeah. And well, I mean, me too. I mean, we have other things going on, but I've gotten back into and spent a lot of time studying guitar this week.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Because to play catch up for the year that I've lost. So in effect, when I'm upstairs, I'll watch something and I will play, and then I'll take a break.
Nice.
And then take out my, you can hear me.
Yeah.
Take out my the Edge of the Empire book. Yep, the book. Which I found I had some papers in it. This is where I get a little OCD.
Yeah.
It feels like the binding isn't quite as tight as it used to be, and I'm annoyed by it.
Yeah, so. I think whoever they use or whoever's, whether it's one or multiple printers, I think the FFG books are beautifully printed, but the binding always seems a little concerning to me.
Okay, that's not just me. And then next to that, I have the DM guide for 5e right here. I just took some things off my desk so that's what I've been focusing on. So
nice. Good for you.
2 RPGs, but then time with music. So because I felt like I needed to. Excellent. You've been talking about going to the conservatory and studying, and I studied for a couple of years. It stopped when COVID came. I did not want to personally, and this is just a me thing, I did not want to study music remotely. And it was mostly because with work, I had 11 hours of meetings on Zoom in an 8-hour day.
Right.
So I didn't want to sit and do virtual learning. Now that my music teacher actually started his own conservatory.
Oh, wow.
Story for us outside of this another day. I'm back now playing.
Yeah.
And it feels very different now. So, but I'll leave that as is. What has been on your desk, obviously, outside of all this that we've been talking about today, anything outside of, I'm going to remove the ability for you to use, not that you need to, because you're very well learned and very well read, not related to Genesys Star Trek.
No, I wasn't actually going to talk about that. Oh boy. Well, first of all, thank you, because you reminded / motivated me that even though it'll be later tonight, I like it's 8 p.m. something right now, and I need to pick up one of my older daughters, or my older daughter, one of my daughters, from sitting in a bit, and then when I come home, I still need to sit down at the piano. And not I usually take a day or so off. I mean, I'm only doing it for like 20 minutes at a pop, but I took off yesterday. It was just busy and I was tired, and it's like, nope, I need to get back in that. No, I also have a little bit of interesting news to share, and I'll share that with you offline when we're done. Because there's nothing official yet. Instead, I'm going to use my moment here to pitch to our listeners. Brad and I are starting some interesting interviews. That's all we're going to say about it. Stay tuned. It's coming.
I can't Mark Ruffalo this one.
I don't think you should.
Okay.
We are going to start. We're going to try to offer an interview monthly. I'm not promising, but we're going to try, regardless of what happens with the timeline. Depending on scheduling, 1 or 2 weeks after this episode drops, we are going to have what will certainly be a wonderful interview in our regular episode. We're going to move these interviews, guys, into our episodes, because we are starting to interview published creators.
I think we landed. I think
a big one.
Yeah, we landed one that I don't think we expected to be able to land.
And
at this point,
and it's not any. I mean, many of our listeners will not have heard of them,
mm-hmm.
but they will soon enough. And what our guest has been writing is just some of the most creative, fun stuff I think either of us have seen. So I won't hashtag Brad Zip it. I get it.
Careful. But the material that we'll talk about, this author, I picked the book up.
Yep.
I think I took a picture of the cover and sent it to you and said, this is really cool. You actually picked the book up. Normally you are not going to cave to my, just like you didn't cave to me, my Star Trek thing that I was pushing with you.
This was a no-brainer when I saw it.
Yeah.
And he's got a couple more books coming out over the next year. And we're just going to leave it there, guys. But needless to say, we have some, Brad's very excited. We have some very, very big stuff coming. We're going to start with interviews. I mean, we've been doing interviews. Again, our interview with Rob was fascinating, and we keep following him religiously on Facebook because he's been dropping updates to his campaign. And he really helped to inspire us. We want more like him, and more. We're really pushing for people who are actively in the work of creating RPG material, whether they are large or small roles. We're just going to leave it there.
Yeah, I'll say this about Rob. And again, this is an episode past when we talked about it. I told you, I texted you when I listened to it. I feel like such an RPG infant. One, and two, I don't think I've ever listened or have known someone who knows a true Renaissance person. This person, if you haven't listened, listen. His background
is great.
It's fascinating unto itself. So, but
we're just So more big things, bigger and bigger things to come now that we are getting our feet kind of grounded with the podcast. Lots more good times to come. And you know what? We were only planning on a few of these, but Brad, I'm wondering as we close out here, if we oughtn't have one more episode around world building. We'll see. We'll talk about it.
We'll talk about it, but
I
think we need to talk a little bit more about this, because I think we could set our setting up really well, and then move from there back to some other stuff and come back after we've built on even more.
And so that and more updates to come. As always, thank you for listening. If you didn't like what you heard, keep it to yourself. If you did, tell everybody you know. Be well, stay well. We will see you all next week.